Hey guys, Daniel here for week 3. Okay, so for my video this week, I wanted to talk about the Curt Flood case. Obviously, we had a video with it, and it was one of the readings we could do as well. So there was really a chance to really get in depth with it. And the more I sort of went over it, there were some really interesting topics that I thought were really cool. So the case itself, by this point, I think most of us understand. Curt Flood, outfielder for the St. Louis Cardinals. He played in St. Louis for 12 years, which included 3 World Series, and really his last 4 years, he was even one of the co-captains. In 1969, he was suddenly told he was traded to Philadelphia, which he didn't want to go, and that's basically where the case happened. So the case itself is Flood v. Kuhn, which I'm guessing is how that's pronounced. That was the commissioner of baseball at the time. So that's where that name comes in. Through the readings and everything in the video, you kind of just see that Flood went against baseball, but he sort of officially sued the commissioner because of the rules that were being imposed with the reserve clause. So the case was argued in March of 1972. So actually, the legal process took 3 years from the time the trade was made until he really was able to have his word put out in front of the court. But it was decided in a couple months, and baseball won that case because the commissioner used the reserve clause, which was after your initial contract, any team or owners could use this, I guess, could hold on to a player and just kind of extend not really their contract, which was the problem, but just extend their rights to that player, even though they didn't have to necessarily re-sign them. In the video, though, you got the quick little snippet there that, obviously Flood's case, he didn't win, but it was sort of the stepping stone to himself and others, and even other leagues, making that jump to try to, get their rights for their players. It was actually 2 other guys, 2 pitchers, a couple years later, in Andy Messersmith and Dave McNally, that actually won their case. So they were both pitchers. Again, I think one was the Dodgers. McNally was the Expos, actually, I believe, the Nationals now. So their case was 2 years later. They were on different teams, but they both had similar contracts, which ran out in 1974. So they played in 75 in their 1-year sort of layover that the owners always used. But then they felt that after that, without new contracts, they should be free to go wherever. So the Players Union, which was sort of just in its early stages when Flood was going through his legal cases, the MLB Players Union, or Players Association, backed Messersmith and McNally and went to arbitration, to a neutral arbitrator, where they actually won in 75, that they had the right to leave if they weren't under contract, which that reserve clause essentially was, since owners would just kind of hold on to their players. So I thought that's really, Flood sort of started the movement, and then these 2 guys, in their case, winning arbitration, which baseball then appealed several times. It went to district courts, but it was always resolved. So then the next year, in 76, baseball actually sort of added that arbitration ruling into their rule books, where with 6 years of experience, you had the right to, depending on different situations, deny trades or where you're going to go in certain situations. So I thought that was cool, just kind of, you got that quick little info of those 2 guys who sort of later on finally took what Flood started and were able to finish and get the freedom for athletes. And then other sports have obviously gone the same route now. It's a daily thing between players coming and going. You saw that in the video as well. Now it's a big deal where players, can extend their contract out or finish their contract out, and then it's just, open season for wherever they want to go. So I thought these were really 2 cool cases, the Curt Flood case, obviously, but then reading into Messersmith and McNally and their legal proceedings, and how it sort of was finally able to get the freedom that guys like Flood and everybody before them had not been able to have because of antitrust laws and the restrictions that the owners had through baseball's rules at the time. And I mentioned antitrust because it's interesting when you read a lot of things from that time. You get that a lot of the rulings, baseball was seen not necessarily as a business. I think obviously in today's age, baseball, any sport really, basketball, especially football and others, it's a sport, but it's big, mega $1 billion industry. So some rules, it's hard when you have basically a state or a federal law that says, this is how a particular business is run. Sometimes when you throw the sports side of it in there, it's just kind of alters things a little bit because you're dealing with different situations. A professional athlete is in fact an employee, but it's not necessarily the same as if you have a corporate business and you have an employee that's just doing paperwork or so. So these cases were really cool to look at, to study. So I'm looking forward to seeing some others like that too.